Hot for TV.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Doctor Who Too Hot for TV. Just in case you haven't heard the last episode and you're like, what the hell's going on here? Myself and Iain Martin from the All of Time and Space podcast were looking at Ground Zero, the DWM comic strip, and the BBC Audio Death Comes to Time, but we waffled on for far too long, so I split it into two. So if you haven't heard the first part, then go back and check that, and then come back here and listen to us waffle on some more.
Too hot for TV.
So, should we talk about Death Comes to Time?
Let's do that.
Okay, so Death Comes to Time isn't exactly a straightforward story in that all the episodes didn't drop at the same time, but it was made for BBC Radio initially for a department called the Fiction Lab as a pilot. The pilot was not commissioned, but BBC agreed to air the pilot on their newly constructed website, because these things were all very new back then. And so, in July 2001, fans got a peek at this potential series with the broadcast of the pilot, complete with some illustrations by Lee Sullivan online. News at the time, the BBC had launched a treasure hunt for lost stories, which turned up bugger all, so that was great. At the Portsmouth Playhouse, they were putting on a brand new Doctor Who play called Vox Day. Don't know what that was. Jack Watling had just died, and Richard Franklin was standing as a Eurosceptic candidate for UKIP.
Oh my God. I did not know that, and now I'm no longer a fan of Mr. Franklin.
Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think UKIP was necessarily what it is today in terms of the views it held at that point. I could be wrong.
I mean, presumably they would still have had the one central policy that they enacted in 2016, but they might not have been quite so egregious in their methodology.
I feel like they sold themselves more as a socialist party that wanted to... Again, I could be wrong here. I'm not, whatever his politics is his politics, but I don't think they were quite the massive racists back then. At least I would hope not for Richard Franklin's take.
It's terrible when you lose people that you've grown up loving to UKIP. I mean, my favourite snooker player was Jimmy White.
Yeah.
And he sort of made some noises in that direction himself, and I was like, well, it's 2015. You're probably not going to win the World Championship, so I'm gonna cut you off, Jimmy. Possibly not with Franklin, because as you say, that was a very different era.
Yes.
Politically. I mean, we were in the height of Blair.
Yeah, there was absolutely no chance of us leaving the European Union at that point. And better times it was too. But there we go. The comic strip running at the time was Way of the Flesh, and the other audio out that month was a Seventh Doctor story, Dust Breeding, from Big Finish, which is quite an iconic one in the early pantheon of Big Finish.
The return of a classic exclusive to BBC I, Doctor Who is back with a brand new adventure starring Sylvester McCoy. Listen to it now at bbc.co.uk/cult.
This world is blockaded. There is no chance of escape. There is no way on or off the planet. No help is coming.
Hello, I'm the Doctor.
And so, on the 13th of July 2001, this 30-minute episode of Doctor Who, At the Temple of the Fourth, as it was called, was broadcast on BBC I. And it's safe to say it kind of broke the internet, at least in the way you could break the internet back then. But people went nuts for it. Now, you were saying earlier that you'd fallen out of love with Doctor Who a little bit at that point.
That's very true. So I wouldn't have been reading the magazine, so I wouldn't have known about this. Certainly at the time it was originally put online. I came to it when they released the finished audio book about a year later, I guess that would have been. Yeah, it's an interesting time in that nothing was really happening, and I think a lot of people had kind of given up on anything happening. So an attempt to revive the show was a very brave thing to do.
Well, I mean, there was a world and who knows where your Doctor Who fandom would be now if this happened, where this was not a successful step into broadcasting things online, and so the only episode that would have ever existed of Death Comes to Time would have been that first 30 minutes.
I mean, it depends really what you take away from Death Comes to Time and whether or not you're into it. But it could have been the start of something really fascinating.
Yeah.
But very different.
So that first episode, how do you think it stands up as a reboot, as a pilot essentially for Doctor Who? Just that first episode.
I have sort of two very different positions on this story from the perspective of me then listening to it for the first time.
Yeah.
And me now being slightly older and more stupid and set in my ways. But at the time, I thought it was really good, a really exciting way of breathing new life into the mythology, doing something interesting for the first time with the Time Lords, creating a... It's amazing how well realised the villain was.
Yeah.
General Tannis is one of the great baddies, and he gets that just with tone of voice.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you can't see any of this. You don't have today's television budget to show planets being boiled away into space as he, floats past in his spaceship. But you're left in absolutely no doubt that this is the biggest bad that the Doctor's ever faced.
Yeah. And, the Doctor's intro, he kind of gets a kind of hero's entry. You get that whole thing of somebody going, there's no way on or off this planet. And then you hear the TARDIS and you get the, hello, I'm the Doctor. And it feels like a real reintroduction and like a mission statement of like, we all know what's coming now. The Doctor's coming to save people in a way that I don't think Big Finish, it ever felt like they were rebooting anything, even though it's the same old cast here. This really feels like, we're going to try and tell a different story.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that. This was presumably, obviously it was intended for radio. It was intended to be the relaunch of the franchise. Big Finish never seemed to have that ambition. They were happy to take people's money for giving them what they wanted and what they loved, and what they were being denied by TV.
Exactly, a 4-part romp at that point, once a month is all they were delivering. So obviously it would have been a real oddity had it not been commissioned, but commissioned it was. And so in February 2002, Death Comes to Time began broadcasting on the BBC website, BBC I, and the remaining 4 episodes were split into 3 parts, so you got basically 10 minutes per week for however many weeks, from the 14th of February 2002, happy Valentine's Day, to the 3rd of May 2002. Now, news from the time, according to DWM, there was a bidding war for the TV rights for Doctor Who, linked between Dan Freedman, who made this, we'll come to him again later, Russell T Davies, Mark Gatiss and Gareth Roberts. Now, we know that there was no bidding war at all, but it was quite exciting to read that at the time. But around this time, all those people did try to get a TV version of Doctor Who off the ground. Also at the time, Fury from the Deep was set to be reproduced on stage with a cast including Michael Sheard and Nick Briggs in Portsmouth. And much like before, where we were dealing with Virgin losing their licence, Dapol lost their licence to produce their iconic range of Doctor Who figures at the time.
Boo.
Sad, sad news for people who like things not to be screen accurate. The comic strip at the time was Children of the Revolution. The DVD release was Tomb of the Cybermen. VHS releases were Planet of the Giants and Underworld, so they were really scraping the barrel there. Big Finish had released Primeval, The One Doctor, Invaders from Mars and Chimes of Midnight, so they're in their early stage of quite big audios that people think well of. And then books, we've got Mad Dogs and Englishmen, Palace of the Red Sun, Hope, and Drift. Have you consumed any of these? Were you a fan of the 8th Doctor books at all?
I stopped reading the 8th Doctor books after, I think it was the first Dalek book, so it was something like 6 books into the range,
right.
And I just thought, compared to what we've had since 1991, these are really, really crap, and I'm not going to read them anymore. I did, however, go back and read most of the 8th Doctor books at some point between, I guess, 2000 and the show coming back, because I think as kind of secretive and furtive and in denial of a fan I was at that point, I still needed to feel like there was something new happening. And these were, given that I lived quite close to the library, these were the cheapest way to get a fix of New Who. I mean, paying £10 a month for a Big Finish was, I think, probably beyond my means at that point.
Fair.
Yeah, I think I read probably all of those books.
I dipped in and out of them, and I guess, as I said before, I found them slightly more accessible to start with for my young brain, but I think probably by the end they're just as convoluted and kind of crazy as any Doctor Who range of books was going to get at that time.
Yeah, and it's interesting that this was being broadcast when, as you said, sort of Big Finish were doing that first couple of runs of Paul McGann, because really that if you had to kind of pick one particular medium and say this was my canon, then I think that realistically was probably the best thing that was on offer. Mm-hmm. And Paul McGann's Doctor, he's in my top 3.
Yeah,
and it is largely down to things like Chimes of Midnight.
Yeah, of course. And, I think people were really engaged with him at that point. I think people were just... Because it was a new Doctor, we kind of got used to the past Doctors through Big Finish and things like that. So it was really exciting to have a new Doctor out there being fantastic, basically.
Yes, being glorious.
Too hot for TV.
General Tannis wages war across the universe. Time Lords are being murdered, and black holes are appearing all over the universe. The Doctor and his companion Antinomy investigate the black holes, while the Minister joins up with Sala to fight Tannis's Carnisian invaders, and Ace is trained as a Time Lord by Casmus. The Doctor soon realises that the black holes are being caused by a Time Lord misusing their powers, while the Minister uses his powers to heal Sala, and she tries to make him use them to stop the Carnisians. Meanwhile, Ace faces the ultimate test on Anima Persis, set for her by the Kingmaker. While Ace is busy doing the test, Casmus is killed by Tannis, who has also killed Antinomy. The Doctor begs the Kingmaker to stop Tannis, who he now realises is a Time Lord, but she will not interfere as he hasn't broken the laws of time. The Doctor is reunited with Ace, who he sends to Earth to help battle the Carnisians, who are on their way there, while he goes to face the Minister, who he now realises has been the cause of the black holes. As the Carnisians approach Earth, they are suddenly left defenceless as they are confronted by the Brigadier and unit. As the final battle takes place at Stonehenge, the Doctor faces Tannis and uses his powers to kill him, and in doing so ends his own life, while Ace is awarded full Time Lord powers and the new age of the Gods of the Fourth begins.
Too hot for TV.
Now, this is credited as being written by a man called Colin Meek, but Colin Meek does not exist. Colin Meek was actually director and producer Dan Freedman, who apparently played a bit of a game with people and kept saying Colin Meek's in Australia and people would be asking for things, and then he'd go back to his office and send emails from Colin Meek to people, which is just
oh wow,
bonkers.
That's amazing. I mean, I sort of came across this scurrilous rumour while I was doing what laughably small preparation I've done for this podcast. And I think in-house at the BBC there is this kind of reluctance to let people write and produce and direct. So it's possible that he kind of professionally had to construct this figure. If I was going to invent a pretend writer, I wouldn't call myself something like Colin Meek. I'd be like Gregory Amazing. I'd create the kind of writer that I'd want to one day become.
Yeah, exactly. Colin Iconic has got more of a ring to it than Colin Meek. Yeah. Now, this story sort of came about because Dan was working with Sophie Aldred. And he said, used to be a Doctor Who. Whatever happened to that? And she told him the story. And he basically convinced Fiction Lab to do a pilot for a new Doctor Who radio series. So Dan wasn't really a fan at all. So took a different approach to writing this script than most people. Do you think it's a successful script?
I think if you look at it in isolation, if you come at Death Comes to Time from the point of view of there's been nothing broadcast since episode 3 of Survival, then I think this is a really good way to round out that era, albeit, 15 years later or whatever. As a self-contained piece, it's strong, it's got depth, it's got mystery, it creates a lot of things that can be explored in future adventures which may or may not happen. So I think it's a really good pilot. I'm having to walk a very narrow tightrope here because I don't want to come down. I can see there's a lot of flaws in this and other issues that we'll come to, but I think for what it is and what it's trying to do, I think it's really strong.
It moves at a cracking pace for 5 episodes, which 5 episodes of classic Doctor Who would not. You get all of time and space, you get alien planets, you get modern day Earth. As you say, there's a cracking mystery that you're not quite sure where it's going to go, and it introduces a lot of compelling characters. And each episode for a 5-part story is quite definitive in that they all move the story along. There's a beginning, middle, and end to each of them, and it kind of focuses on a different set of people while cutting back to the other characters. Like, you almost forget by episode 5, when you're on the Salisbury Plains in a huge battle, that there was a vampire mystery 3 episodes ago, but yet it's all part of the same story. It's a bit like Flux.
I was going to say exactly that.
Yeah.
It is. It's like a very early and slightly better version of Flux.
It's also a really odd mix of continuity light but mythos heavy. So it creates this whole backstory for the Time Lords, but it assumes that you know who the Doctor is, and indeed the Brigadier, which we'll come to in a bit, and who Ace is. But yet they're not relying on the Daleks and the Cybermen and all these other things you would think you would bring in. So what is your thoughts on this mythos, especially what they do with the Time Lords?
As you were just saying about Dan Freedman not necessarily being that much of a Doctor Who person and not being steeped in the continuity that we had, he has looked at the abilities of the Doctor and I guess fleshed out a kind of extra layer of Time Lords above the bog standard capital dwelling politicos.
Yeah.
There's this kind of small cabal who secretly have these extra gifts and extra powers, and the Doctor's one of them. And I remember, that was by far and away the most exciting thing about the whole story. The idea that the Doctor and the Minister, and there were a couple of other Time Lords mentioned, were somehow more an extra, kind of does tie in to our old friend the Cartmel Master Plan and the idea that the Doctor was slightly more than just a Time Lord. So in myriad ways, you can see this as an absolutely logical successor to what came before and a completely different interpretation of it at the same time.
Yeah, it's essentially Doctor Who's Star Wars almost. You're almost given the Time Lords the Force. So maybe it's Doctor Who's Phantom Menace, which I know wasn't exactly a successful relaunch, but it was still a relaunch. One of the things it really it doesn't lack it, but you would never do a reboot of Doctor Who today that didn't have a monster in it. Like, there's a vampire, which is a very 90s thing, but that's just a human with some pointy teeth, right? And then the central villain is obviously a Time Lord, although we don't know that until the end. So it's very Doctor Who for kind of that era of, like, I think it draws a lot from kind of the Buffy school of kind of storytelling.
Well, it's got Anthony Stewart Head in it. I mean, you can't get much more Buffy than that.
Buffy does have a link to this, which we'll come to a bit later on as we kind of deal with its legacy, but that isn't just Anthony Stewart Head. You obviously first heard it on CD, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So were you aware of the artwork that accompanied each episode when it was online?
No, I mean, I think I'd seen an image or two, but no. So I'm guessing they were amazing.
They were great. It was not an animation by any sense of the word, but it was enhanced artwork with the occasional moving thing. Like if a spaceship came on, it would move. The spaceship would move, but none of the characters moved or their mouths or anything like that.
Right. Okay. So I mean, I did see when they did Sharda and when they did one with Colin Baker
Yeah.
quite soon after this. So I'm guessing it would be about that same level
Yes.
of flash animation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was probably slightly more primitive than that, because obviously the internet was still a relatively new thing at the time, and because it's the BBC, they had to make sure dial-up was still a thing, but also I think you were starting to get towards broadband and fast internet. But they had to make sure whatever it was completely accessible to everybody, whether you've got the slowest internet connection in the world or super fast broadband or whatever the equivalent was at the time. So that's why it couldn't be a full animation. Funnily enough, on the CD, I don't know whether you listen to the extras or anything like that, but there's an interview with Sylvester McCoy and
and a technology journalist.
a technology journalist who loves Doctor Who, and they go, "Do you think this could be the future of broadcasting, like on the internet?" And this technology journalist is just like, "Absolutely not. And Doctor Who should stay in the past too. Like, we love it, but this is never going to take off." And now,
I mean, it's fantastic. You have Sylvester McCoy sitting there basically inventing Netflix live on the radio.
I think this will be the place where this media is, its natural home in 10, 20 years.
And the technology guy, the future-facing, I'm an agent of chaos guy, he's like, no, don't want this. I like 4 television channels. And,
I'm not even going to watch this until it comes out on video. Thank you very much.
Oh, right. It's like that interview with David Bowie with Paxman, where Bowie's talking about the internet from about 96, 97, and he's sort of predicting exactly how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And again, Sylvester McCoy had enough foresight or kind of hippie faith in the new invading voodoo of this new technology to be absolutely, this can be where drama lives. The internet is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
I was just blown away by the technology guy there.
Yeah.
We won't name him. He's probably retired.
He's probably retired and doesn't care because he was getting paid to talk about that, and we weren't. So the art, one thing I would say, so obviously the first episode comes out 6 months or whatever it is beforehand, and they add the art. Obviously it wasn't going to have art when it was on the radio, but they added it for the website. And I think Dan Freedman goes into writing those final 4 episodes knowing there's going to be art there. Because if you it's largely well done, but I would say especially that final battle, there's points where there's just loads of music, and it kind of doesn't work without the visuals. I mean, you can guess what's going on, but it's like that's definitely done for and here's a picture of an explosion, and here's an exploding spaceship, and that sort of thing.
Yes, I mean I was going to come to this because it does kind of detach itself from being a straightforward radio drama, and as you say, by the final episode, it is largely like listening to a missing episode, in that you can follow it, but you know that you're not being served the full product.
Exactly.
I mean, is it still online? Can I go and check this out now?
So somebody's done a remastered version that's on YouTube.
Oh, wonderful!
So I didn't have to, I had to listen to this while I was doing other things. So I would have loved to have sat down for about 3 hours and consume the art. But it's well worth a skip through. Especially, I mean, we'll talk about the final battle in a bit, but especially that final battle works really well, visually. Dan also directed it. He gets some great performances, and it's kind of got a slightly sparse sound design in places, but it kind of works in its favour, I think. I think the big finishes at the time were possibly better sound designed, but they make some really interesting choices here. There's a great use of classical music, especially during the Minister and the Doctor's confrontation, that final battle and the ending. I think they use that classical music, and it was obviously to save money, but it works really well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing, and obviously we don't know too much about Colin Meek and Dan Freedman, but I guess Freedman would have been a radio guy, and thus would have had a very different approach to Big Finish because he was a professional, probably BBC radio guy, and knew exactly how to do it and what would work, whereas I think Big Finish kind of maybe took a year or two to settle down into their format. And I think, this is a very confident production. You can hear it in the sparsity of that sound design. They know there's no need to jam it full of extraneous bits of music or sound effects just because they've got access to a huge computer full of BBC sound effects. They're happy to just let it be what it is, and that's, I think, that's what's made it age quite well.
Yeah. Episode 4, you get Ace going off into that sort of haunted cave, and the sound design in there and like the atmosphere is. I remember thinking at the time, and I still think it now. It's fucking terrifying.
It is, isn't it? I'm pretty sure they did actually take a sound recording team into the Wookiee Hole caves or something, because it's so visual, that bit, isn't it? I mean, it's. You can see that exactly when you close your eyes. You can visualize exactly how it was supposed to look, and isn't that an amazing thing?
Yeah, it's very unsettling. Let's talk a bit about the Doctor and Ace here. Do you think this could only work for this Doctor and companion combination?
I think telling this particular story would only really work for this Doctor and companion.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to how it was presumably conceived in isolation by a man who wasn't a legacy Doctor Who fan.
Yeah.
But the idea of Ace going on the journey that she goes through in this story was exactly what was supposed to happen in the unmade season 27. So, that was great. And that, again, if this was all there was after Survival, I think this would have been so fulfilling for a fan,
I think Ace's story in particular is like... They separate the Doctor and Ace for most of it, so there's obviously some time has passed. But I think it's a really interesting take on both of those characters, and making the Doctor a more weary kind of version of himself as well.
Yeah, you wonder if part of that initial conversation between Sophie Aldred and Dan Freedman was her saying, well, this is what we were going to do with the character, and this is how it would have evolved, and for all we know, that's exactly all he sat down to write.
Yeah, but I think what you get there is, because it's not laboured with the fan experience of talking about, well, it could have been this story or this story and this was going to happen. It's just like, how do you turn Ace into a Time Lord? And it's, like, she goes through some shit in order to get there.
Shit aplenty.
But McCoy's Doctor is still the great manipulator. He's getting the rebels to cripple the Carnesians and stuff like that, even though, to a certain extent, his Doctor isn't in it that much and sort of plays second fiddle to the Minister.
Yeah, I think he was... This is another one of those things where I don't necessarily want to say what I was about to say, but I think this might be Sylvester McCoy's finest hour as the Doctor.
Yeah.
And it is that kind of classic trope of not using the Doctor that much. You think of like the Andrew Cartmel War trilogy and the New Adventures. You can do a lot more with that character by creating a Doctor-shaped hole in the story and letting other people fill it. And I think McCoy brought exactly what you would have wanted as a New Adventures fan, or as a fan of any of the other media. That Doctor had become exactly who he was portraying in those episodes. And I think that was remarkable.
Yeah, I think at the time it was regarded as certainly his best performance as the Doctor. I think it's probably been... I haven't listened to all the Big Finishes, but I think it's probably been superseded by some Big Finishes by now. And just with a view that he's an older actor and probably, done more things. But certainly by this point, and, not everybody is kind of steeped in Big Finish. So, like, as kind of a one-off finale for that Doctor... I think you get his best performance.
Yeah, I mean, he's so good. He can do sort of very still and silent, quiet acting, but you can still kind of feel the malevolent energy coming off of him. And he's that much more of just a better actor at this point. Yeah. He's 10 years on from his Doctor Who days on TV. He has just become a more confident performer who can do more with less.
Yeah.
He was. There are some people who don't think he was a very good Doctor on the TV. I don't try to understand that particular psychopathy, but they point to him being, a clown who can't do shouting.
Yeah.
But I think by this point he absolutely can do shouting.
I also think perhaps there's a bit of a myth surrounding the actors that played the Doctors in the classic series. Like somehow they were all the greatest actors of their generation up until the tail end of the 80s. Which, I'm not disputing that some of them have done some great things, but John Pertwee, Mr. Light Entertainment's probably the person that takes the role the most seriously. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's ever going to go, Tom Baker, what a great actor. So,
Well, he has such a fine body of work to point to. Yeah, but look at him in this. Oh. We never really got the chance to judge him as a stage or screen actor because he did 2 films,
yeah.
and some crappy version of Cluedo that was on ITV in the early 90s. He may well have gone on to be a good actor, but he's just always been Tom Baker in
Exactly.
Doctor Who and that episode of Blackadder. That's pretty much it.
But McCoy seems to get a bum end of the deal because people had got it in for John Nathan Turner, I think, of him having certain limitations as an actor. And he does have certain limitations, but I would argue so has Matt Smith, and so has David Tennant, and so has every other actor that's played the role of the Doctor, probably. So it's just really about how the directors and the scripts utilised the skill set of that actor, and I think here they are utilised perfectly, and 90% of the time they're utilised perfectly in the McCoy era. There's just the odd moment you can kind of go, oh, that's a bit dodgy.
Yeah, oh, you shouldn't have done that face.
Yeah.
Oh.
But also, if they'd had more time, I imagine there's a few things he would have done a retake on and be fine. But
absolutely, and for that, let's say 5% of his screen time where he was perhaps not brilliant, there was 95% where he was absolutely, you couldn't take your eyes off him on screen. He was, and certainly by sort of 25 and 26, where he's playing it much more dark and much more brooding, he was an electric performer and so comfortably the best Doctor from the classic run. Yeah. There, I've said it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
And in this, he comfortably holds his own against some pretty heavyweight actors. Like, I'm thinking in particular of the confrontation scene between him and Stephen Fry when they're on the side of a mountain, and it's revealed that Stephen Fry is sort of the bad guy. Not the bad guy, he's doing things for the good reasons, but he's the reason that the universe is full of black holes because he's been using his powers. And it would be very easy for a lesser actor to get overshadowed in that scene, and I don't think McCoy does get overshadowed at all.
I think you're absolutely right. They go toe to toe, and this was obviously at a point in Stephen Fry's career where he was arguably, I think, at the top of his acting game. I mean, he'd made that film about Oscar Wilde.
Yeah. Around
that time, this was a good kind of 5 or 6 years after his meltdown in the West End and his breakdown and whatever. This was Fry. I've never heard him so good, and he's one of those people I can't really listen to now because by the time you're my age, you've had 30 or 40 years of Stephen Fry, and you're like, yeah, I don't want to hear anything else from this guy. He was very good in this and taking it seriously, and obviously that's one of the biggest criticisms that people always have is, they're just in it for the money, they're just doing it to make their kids happy, they're not taking it seriously, they're all being a bit camp. But Fry was amazing in this.
Yeah.
I mean, they all were, but by and large.
I mean, it's a fantastic cast, but Stephen Fry in particular, Stephen Fry's had an association with Doctor Who for a while in one form or another. He was going to write a Doctor Who story for a bit, but that never got made. And then he's in Spyfall for about a minute.
He's in Spyfall, yeah. Yes.
It's a great little cameo, but like here he gets this is like his most long-term association with the show. Like if he never does anything else, he will have played the Minister, who, I mean, is basically... it's another Time Lord, but it could be the Doctor. He's perfect Doctor material for this kind of story. I
mean, it could very much be the 8th Doctor specifically, couldn't it?
Yeah.
He's got, obviously there's that slightly Byronic design to him.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've not seen all the drawings, but I've seen the front cover, damn it, and I know what I'm looking at. And he's a good, sweet, kind person, but he just has it's not even a weakness. He just fundamentally misunderstood one of his lectures on how to be a great Time Lord God. He fell asleep during the bit about don't use your powers. And apart from that...
His character has that real moral quandary of using his powers. And he gets these meaty scenes where he heals Sala, his companion, and they kind of intercut in between Ace getting trained as a Time Lord, learning about not to use it, which is very well done. And then she begs him to save save people and to use his powers during an invasion. And it's really gripping stuff. And not to mention, again, the confrontation between the Doctor and the Minister.
It is great, and it's something which feels kind of fresh because it's not some kind of tedious fanwanky plot involving bringing back Davros and the Daleks and whatever. We're getting something new, and that's what this, by definition, that is what a pilot should try to be doing, and it's what this does in spades, and it is what Rose did on the TV. You've got certain established parameters to work within, but you can do your own thing, and that's what's happening here, and that's why it's so strong, I think.
It is, and it's got a really strong cast, and also a strong cast that some of them, like, there's far too many casts to mention. It's a bigger cast than we get on TV now. It's a bigger cast than we get in Big Finish things, and obviously unlimited extras. But Anthony Stewart Head and Jacqueline Pearce are both in it for like a short amount of time, and then obviously you've got great casting in a number of other roles. But what I want to talk about quickly is Kevin Eldon is here.
Brilliant. Yes, good. I'm glad you brought Kevin up. Where do you stand on Kevin?
In this or in general?
In general.
I think he shows up in things and is usually pretty good, but I don't think I've ever been overly exposed to him, I don't think.
Fair dues.
Do you have a strong feeling on him?
Well, he is one of those people who managed to be in or on the periphery of every kind of comedy show that I loved.
Yes.
From the the 90s. He'd be in, I think he was probably in the Day to Day, or certainly on the radio version of that. He was in things like Big Train, Black Books. You could always rely on him to turn up and do his very identifiable shtick, which became, I would say, after 20 years, really fucking annoying. I'm sure he's a lovely guy and he's brilliant at what he does, but it was done to death. So hearing him in this was a very different experience.
Well, it was also like, I didn't realise it was him, proving that he can do something different, I guess.
Yeah.
And he plays Antimony, who is the companion of the Seventh Doctor, another one-off companion who the Doctor's presumably been travelling with for quite a while. And I do love the conceit that he's the Doctor's attempt to build the perfect companion.
It's a lovely idea.
Yeah.
And I think played absolutely brilliantly by an in no way annoying Kevin Eldon. I love the character.
Yeah.
I felt sad when events played out. It's that kind of idea, if the Doctor could build a companion, who would he build? It's up there with, if the Doctor was human, he'd go to this school in the First World War, and it's one of those really big, meaty ideas about the Doctor and his relationship and understanding to humanity.
This idea is very briefly considered by Paul Abbott's pitch for Series 1 of Doctor Who, in that he wanted to do a story, and they shouldn't have done it, and I'm glad they didn't, where Rose was the Doctor's attempt to kind of manufacture the perfect companion.
Would it have been lots of him nipping around in her timeline and sort of shaping her when she was 12?
Yeah,
like
I think it would have been. I'm glad they didn't do that.
Yeah, no, that sounds like something they'd do in Star Trek.
Yeah, we got Boomtown instead, so...
That was a win.
With Antimony, he's only in the first sort of 3 episodes, I think, but he has a lovely little interplay with this police officer in episode 2 when they're hunting for vampires, and the shock in his voice when Tanis reveals that he's not a real boy. This kind of naive but intelligent kind of... If you could design a Doctor Who companion, that's almost the classic cliche. It's really well done.
Yeah, I think so. I'm also wondering if there's an element of because after Ace proved to be such a good companion, you'd think the Doctor would stipulate that any future companion doesn't necessarily need to be carrying around explosives, but it does help if they can get a bit handy.
Yeah.
But Antimony feels like a sort of anti-Ace in that he's all observing and learning rather than interacting.
But also it's an evolution, like you say, from Ace, because Ace was very useful for the Doctor to be the person with explosives. So having a companion who's a bit of a thug, or can be a bit of a thug, is great. So I think that's very cleverly done from someone who probably didn't know that era very well. And obviously Kevin Eldon will return in Jodie Whittaker's first season as Ribbons in It Takes You Away.
He was like really heavily made up,
Yes,
wasn't
yeah,
he? He was like a creature or something.
Again, you wouldn't know.
Am I right?
Yeah, you wouldn't know it was him.
Yeah. So he is actually a hugely versatile performer. And I just unfortunately saw him doing the same thing every time he did the same thing.
Exactly. So our main villain is General Tannis, played by John Sessions, who gives an absolutely brilliant scenery-chewing performance. So what do we think of this scheming Time Lord and his attempts to take over the universe in a very traditional way?
I mean, how long have you got? I think it's fascinating that the character was so restrained. Given what we know about the Minister and the Doctor and the kind of parameters these guys operate in, you think Tannis could have conquered the universe in about 10 minutes if he'd been happy to break a few rules. But even he is, I suppose, in many ways, the kind of ultimate adherent of rules and, maintaining the status quo. He's just got a very brutal way of exacting that. Yeah, I think it was such a astonishingly powerful and consistent performance, and that you could hear how much fun the character was having. Not the actor, but you could hear how much fun the character was having.
Yeah.
Doing what he was doing. He's obviously decided, I'm going to be this sort of a baddie. I'm going to go for military strength. Basically doing what the war chief was doing back in the war games. He's allied himself with an army so that he can go out and have a bit of fun and get his bad yah-yahs out, but to much better and more successful means. And there are some really good extra features on the disc where there's an interview with John Humphreys where John Sessions is in character as Tannis, and he's it's not a difficult creation for him to inhabit. Anyone who's seen Stella Street will know that John Sessions is perfectly capable of keeping it up for hours and hours and improvising wildly. But in a story that had this many good points, I think we were really spoiled to get John Sessions, especially when you consider how, I would say, poorly utilised he was when he finally made it to TV.
Well, he's just a voice of a computer, isn't he? And when he finally makes TV.
Exactly.
So we live in hope that he'll get another shot at a better role.
He's dead now.
Oh, is he?
He's not.
Oh.
Yeah, he died last year.
Oh, bugger, I missed that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, but we don't live in hope that he's going to get a better role.
Well, I mean, I'm sure Big Finish could take some of his offcuts from Stella Street and do something with that. I'm sure they probably have. There's going to be a box set, isn't there?
Didn't he get a bit UKIP as well, though?
I hope not. I really hope not.
I'll check this, and if that's not true, I'll cut it out.
If he did, then that's really sad, because I don't feel like he was that sort of a human being. But
no,
but he's not someone that we know too much about at the same time.
Right.
So who knows?
Hello everybody, it's Future Dylan here, and I'm here to report that John Sessions did indeed get a little bit UKIP in his later years. According to Wikipedia, the ever-reliable Wikipedia, a Eurosceptic, Sessions voiced his support for the UK Independence Party. He stated, "I got so bored with people going UKIP are a bunch of racists. They're nothing of the kind. Nigel Farage talks more sense than the rest of the politicians put together." So there we go. Sessions was in fact a friend of Richard Franklin's. He does get some fantastic one-liners in this as well. He has a scene where I think he kills somebody and he just goes, "Get me some clean boots, these ones are covered in blood." He has a couple of proper laugh-out-loud moments as this malevolent dictator.
Yeah, some of his lines are sort of straight out of the Radio 4 comedy playbook. They're really good payoffs to scenes or entire episodes. But yeah, he just manages to, I suppose, dilute what would otherwise be quite a serious and worthy bit of radio drama.
Yeah.
He just manages to put a bit of fun in it, and that's always what you want from a really big villain.
Yeah.
Is for them to be more fun than the Doctor. People always say this now of the Master. Mm-hmm. The idea is the Master should always be more fun than the Doctor.
Yeah.
I'd listen to a lot of stories about General Tannis.
Yes.
If there were any way of going back in time and producing them. while we still had John Sessions.
Yes.
You know, there are 3 or 4 things that could have grown out of this had they sort of continued it as a series. And Tanis, I would say, should have absolutely been one of the central planks of that.
I completely agree, and we'll talk about where this might have gone shortly. Are there any other performances you want to particularly jump in on? Because, I mean, there's a lot to choose from, but are there any that you particularly love?
I think everyone else in it is, to a greater or lesser degree, you know, at the very least, workmanlike.
Yeah.
There's maybe 1 or 2 people who their performance kind of grates a little bit. But I did like some of the stuff John Coleshaw did. Now, very show-offy, I met John Coleshaw once at a wedding, and we ended up playing croquet on the lawn, just the 2 of us. And for some reason, we both ended up doing it in character as the 4th Doctor. So that was a really fun afternoon.
Brilliant.
And obviously we know him from Dead Ringers and his he loves doing a bit of Doctor Who, and now I believe he's firmly entrenched with Big Finish as well.
Yes.
Every extra or minor role he played, he did with kind of real grit and conviction. And then you get him doing George W. Bush, which is just, I guess, there for comedy value and to make it feel kind of contemporary. And that did grate a little bit, but at the same time, it hasn't aged badly.
Yeah, also the little George Bush and Tony Blair thing, it's so brief that it's not like they're intrinsic to the plot. It's just a nice little funny moment of kind of light relief.
Yeah, and we're better off for it being there, I think.
Yeah.
Because, again, it just managed to add a little sprinkle of fun to this big... You know, you've got Ace in Dagobah learning to be a Time Lord from the Time Lord Yoda, who's played by Dr. Legg out of EastEnders. So, you know, it's good to leaven that and to lighten it with some more sort of fun bit.
We get this moment where the Canisians essentially head to Earth, and we're like, oh, here we go, big invasion of Earth. And then you cut to some people at a radar station in sort of classic 70s Doctor Who style, which is great fun. And then they obviously call George W. Bush, who you would expect to go and bomb them. And then the British Prime Minister has all the answers. And we get this fantastic moment of the Canisian ships exploding. And then it's only the Brigadier that shows up. Oh, what a moment.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's a real hero introduction. I think his line is, "I'm the Brigadier, get out of my solar system."
Yes, something like that.
You know, the first time you hear it, the hairs on your arms go up. It's like, oh my God, it's the Brigadier. Completely out of character for the Brigadier to introduce himself like, you know, like he's Superman or something. You know, and you'd feel the need, I think, to specify which Brigadier you were, because there are quite a few of them. And get out of my solar system is, you know, obviously a nod to the line from Battlefield. But for all that it's kind of a bit crap and you know, slightly crass, it's brilliant to hear it. Yeah. It's so good.
And as a 15-year-old, where I was sat down watching that on a slow internet, I can remember it to this day, what an exciting moment it was. Because I guess I don't think Doctor Who had necessarily done those sort of surprise reveals. At least it didn't feel like, growing up as a fan in the 90s especially, like every video you bought had a cover. So Earthshock, there was never going to be a case of buying the video and not knowing the Cybermen were going to appear and stuff like that. So it was, I think, that and Dust Breeding, which was the 7th Doctor story we talked about earlier, where the Master appears out of nowhere. This and that were the first 2 kind of big surprises I ever got from Doctor Who, almost.
And again, it shows how, in a lot of people's minds, Nick Courtney's Brigadier was absolutely central to Doctor Who, and if you're ever going to do any version of the show, or a book, or a comic strip, or whatever, you're going to put the Brigadier in it. I mean, he worked, I think, a lot with Paul McGann and I struggle to remember the name of the 4th story of the first season with Paul
Minuet in Hell.
Thank you so much, dear boy. Minuet in Hell. And they really worked well together. But yeah, just dropping him in this for that little recap, it didn't need to be any bigger of a cameo than it was, because it just perfectly did everything it needed to do in terms of the plot and in terms of giving all the fans a little squee moment.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like you say, that people think he's so intrinsic. And it's interesting that, so me and Jack covered, like last year, one of the unmade Doctor Who film scripts by Johnny Byrne. And
oh, yes, I heard that.
And the Brigadier, inexplicably, for something that's almost trying to be a reboot in and a Hollywood thing, makes an appearance in virtually every draft of it. And as one like this, where you're like, if you don't know who the Brigadier is, then you've got no reason to know who that character is, because it's never really explained. But, I mean, I've always felt, and I think a lot of people have felt, that Stephen Moffat was gutted that Nick Courtney died before he took over Doctor Who and got a chance to put him in there, because he was always referencing him. It was bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, if you're ever going to do that, this is absolutely the way to cameo that character. You don't need to know anything about them. It's amazing if you know who it is and you get it. But if you've never heard of the Brigadier but you're a Doctor Who fan, then this is in no way going to spoil your enjoyment. And it is, I think, a real shame that they couldn't find a way to get Nick Courtney back into the show. Mm-hmm. Although, obviously, by the time Stephen Moffat was running it, he'd have been so old. Yeah,
I mean, when he shows up in the Sarah Jane Adventures, it's an old man that probably shouldn't be doing a TV show.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost cruel, but he was probably glad for the money and the day out or whatever. But that this is and this will always be a problem with Doctor Who, is that this is one person's version of Doctor Who based on what they know about the show. The Johnny Byrne script was based on what he thought people knew about the show. Some people think you have to have the Daleks in every episode, Catherine Tate.
Yeah.
Some people think you have to have Unit in it all the time. Some people think he's always got to have a big scarf.
Yeah.
There's always going to be this kind of weight of, we have to tick these boxes in order for it to count as Doctor Who. And none of them are true.
Yeah.
And it can be anything, and it should be capable of being anything. But yeah, you're always going to get this kind of thing going on.
And even as recent as the last series of Doctor Who, there was a brief cameo, sort of, at least audio-wise, of the Brigadier.
Yeah, and I did like that. I couldn't really hear it. So over here in America, we've got really big TVs that sort of sit above the fireplace, and we get all the wind coming through. So I couldn't really hear much of the dialogue in flux. But I'd known from sort of scrolling through Twitter while it was being broadcast, I knew that there was some moment to kind of be aware of.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's a lovely little way to do it. Not going to hurt anyone if you don't get it, but if you do get it, it makes your Sunday.
Exactly. So the Brigadier appears. We get a huge battle, a battle in space, exploding spaceships. We get a battle of soldiers on Salisbury Plain, and then all of a sudden we've got a final showdown between the Doctor and Tanis.
Yes.
Where the Doctor uses his powers, does a lovely speech about being a god, essentially, and not being able to walk amongst people, and that he's a device of time and he's tired. And he kills Tanis and himself, which was a turn-up for the books.
I mean, I'll be honest, that was coming out of left field at this point, wasn't it? So this is one of the interesting questions, and obviously we know that the final 4 episodes were only completed with a view to this being a kind of one-shot online story, and it probably wasn't going to go on to be a big series, so they took the decision to kill off the Doctor. But what a moment! What an ending! It was, the proverbial drop your bacon sandwich moment.
And at the time, I remember being almost heartbroken. I was like, oh my God, they've killed Doctor Who. Even though we've met the 8th Doctor and he's doing Storm Warning by this point.
Well, exactly.
But I guess what people forget as well is that there was still some debate over whether Paul McGann was actually a canon Doctor Who at that point.
Yeah, I can sort of remember that. And it largely comes down to, if you're the sort of fan who really can't get on with the idea of the Doctor kissing Grace because he's particularly happy, then you can write him out of existence, and you can say that nothing ever happened after Survival until this story, and that's how it ends. But, why would you want to disregard one of the most glorious actors to play the Doctor? I'll never understand that.
If Doctor Who ended tomorrow, do you think a story like this is a fitting ending for it, or do you want to see the Doctor wander off into time and space forever?
I think somebody said a long time ago that Doctor Who is only ever always going to come back now.
Yeah.
And if Doctor Who ended tomorrow, it might be 20 years, but it would come back.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't think it's the sort of show that you could reboot from scratch. You know, you're not going to start off with a new character who's called the Doctor, who's on Earth with his granddaughter. So you need to keep the continuity going, and killing off the Doctor is never going to be a good idea, given that it's the only thing that can ever happen in the show that would ever change anything. Now that we've seen a female Doctor, we've crossed that line.
Yeah.
This show is predicated on the Doctor being in life-threatening peril at some point in every 45-minute slice of the show you get. But this feels like, again, maybe if Dan Freedman didn't know that there had been a TV movie with the Eighth Doctor, if he didn't know that in an office down the corridor a man called Russell was hammering out the very, very early drafts of what would be the next TV show. If he didn't know the show was coming back, this possibly is what you would do.
He wouldn't have known that by the time this happened. And there was all sorts of things that happened at the time amongst fandom. Some fans said it was a move from the BBC to decanonise the Eighth Doctor so that they had more lives left of the 13 to
dear, oh dear, oh dear.
So they could milk more out of it, which I think is brilliant. But
I love this fan idea that the BBC is one group, is one room of people in grey suits like the gods of Ragnarok, who have consistent opinions and are all capable of going on and enacting them. The BBC is a huge structure of people who don't know each other, who come and go, and there's no initiative, there's no drive, there's no directive. The person on the phone doesn't know what a missing episode is when someone phones up to report they found a missing episode.
Yeah.
The BBC's like any other institution. It's a hopelessly fragmented group of people who are just there for their money. Thank you very much. So the idea that they'd operate behind the scenes to discount a Doctor they'd co-produced, I mean, what level are some of these people operating on?
So another little Doctor Who conspiracy theory from the time was, so this was panned by Doctor Who magazine. Some people felt that it was panned by DWM because they were obviously all mates with the Big Finish lot, and they were worried that if it was a success, Big Finish would lose their licence to produce Doctor Who audio and this would continue.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can see that. I don't know how true it is that the DWM people were in that close of a thing with Nick Briggs and other people who might work for Big Finish. If I assume it's just Nick Briggs, but that's certainly...
Nick Briggs wasn't running it at the point. I think it was Gary Russell still running it then.
Ah, right, yeah. So obviously Gary Russell does have a sort of nodding acquaintance with Doctor Who magazine, if we're being honest.
I mean, that could be the sort of thing that happened, but also it's one person writing a review for a magazine of one story, and if it's not your cup of tea, it's not your cup of tea, so you're going to slag it off.
Yeah, exactly. And by this point, everything is so niche. The magazine has got, well, I don't know, probably 10,000 subscribers. Big Finish get a finite number of orders every month.
Yeah.
I mean, probably a lot more now, but it's little groups of incels at different points around the UK having flame wars with each other, isn't it? It's so insignificant.
Obviously, this story was not to continue. Do you know anything about where it was going to head next or any plans?
No, I mean, I've just discovered there is a podcast series called The Minister of Chance, which I'm going to be listening to very soon. But I'm sure you can tell me more about
well, it's funny you should say that. So, Dan Freedman, his pitch was essentially that this was a soft ending to Doctor Who, the TV series. And he wanted the series to continue on television, and he wanted to be the person to write and produce it. And his pitch, which is a weird one, is that the Doctor dies at the end of Death Comes to Time, and the new series of Doctor Who, for the first few episodes, concentrates on the Minister and Ace's adventures in a Time Lordless universe, essentially. And then the Doctor has some big resurrection like Jesus, possibly played by Sylvester McCoy, possibly by another actor. And that's what he wanted to do. And I was saying earlier that there was a Buffy connection. He went over to America, to the Buffy set, to just kind of have a look at how things worked over there and to see whether he could transport that style of sort of showrunnership back to the UK. ultimately, I think everybody felt that a radio producer was not the best person to make a flagship show for the BBC, and it didn't amount to much. But there's a wonderful book by Paul Hayes called The Long Games from 10 Acre Films, which looks into that whole period of kind of the BBC, and it does go into a bit more detail about kind of what Dan Freedman wanted to do with it. Do you think that's an interesting reboot?
I mean, I'm agog. I'm on tenterhooks, struggling to process that. That's incredible. Of all the things to do, you think we'll bring back Doctor Who, but we won't worry about the Doctor, but we'll definitely keep Ace in it, because she was really good. The problem is everything we know about how these things work now, we know through the benefit of hindsight, and we know because Russell T Davies wrote the episode of Doctor Who called Rose. And you reboot a show by only giving away the barest essentials and building it slowly when you've got people on side. And it sounds like this putative show from Dan Freedman would have done exactly what the TV movie did and dropped enough continuity in the first 20 seconds to kind of scare anyone off. It's not a show about Ace, much as I like the character. You couldn't have called it Doctor Who, really. Well, you could. I mean,
you could, because
I'm still. I feel like you've dropped a bombshell on me, and I'm trying to come to terms with it live, even though this is stuff that happened 20 years ago, and I just didn't know about it.
I mean, it's still valid as Doctor Who, isn't it? If there isn't anybody called Doctor Who in it, because it's still a question.
Yeah, no, fine, sure. I think, whilst it would have been very bad Doctor Who that would have been cancelled after a series, I think it would have been a really interesting series.
Yeah. And
I think if he'd just tweaked the idea and just thought of doing a TV show called The Minister, that was, a Doctor Who spin-off if you wanted it to be, but if you didn't know that and you didn't care, then it wouldn't be a problem. Then it could have been a kind of somewhere between Doctor Who and Sapphire and Steel kind of thing in its own right, which possibly is what this podcast is all about. I don't know yet.
Since you have said you're going to listen to it, I won't give away too much of the plot or anything, but I can give you a little bit of background.
Oh, do.
So this podcast happened, I can't remember exactly when, but it was after the new series had been back for a while. And Dan Freedman just decided there was life in the old character yet. And so he decided to do a series that was crowdfunded about the adventures of the Minister of Chance. There's no mention of Doctor Who. There's no kind of... It's not a spin-off in the kind of knowing way that the BBV ones were, where you have like a character that's like the Doctor called the Professor. And, there's the gods of the Fourth and what have you, but they aren't Time Lords in all but name. Like, they get to do some new and interesting things with them. They obviously, Stephen Fry was busy, so they got Julian Wadham, who to play the Minister, who does a good job. And then you get loads of people who have been in sci-fi shows and Doctor Who, including Sylvester McCoy and Paul McGann, who show up in different roles, but again, not roles that are like their Doctors. It's very much just, these are good actors that we've got access to. Paul Darrow shows up in it as well.
Oh, how marvellous.
So it's got a good cast. I really liked the first 2 or 3 episodes. I think there's 5 in total. And then for reasons that I won't go into, I disliked how it finished. But, I'm sure you...
Can we drill down into that? Could you maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 was the worst thing ever, where would you... How bad was it?
It's not that it's bad, it's more a case of I've heard this before.
Ah, fair enough.
So it is good, but it didn't end there. So they crowdfunded this series and they were like, we could probably make a film of this. And so they shot like a kind of teaser for it, starring Paul McGann and Tim... Who's the guy from Blackadder who's in the...
Tim McInerney.
Yes, him. And they're in it, and it's like a little 10-minute thing, but it's since disappeared off the internet for some reason, which is a bit of a shame, because it wasn't bad. And they tried to crowdfund a feature film, which was going to cost a few million quid, but it just kind of proved to be too much for the reach of a project like this. Like, the Minister series is an interesting fantasy series in its own right, whether you like Doctor Who or not. But it just didn't have the reach to kind of raise a few million quid. And if you want to read more about the story of how that did or didn't happen, you can go to Obverse Books and buy my book, Downtime, The Lost Years of Doctor Who, which which talks about many spin-offs of Doctor Who, including The Minister of Chance. But I would say say to people, if you do like Death Comes to Time, it's nice to hear that character continued, even if it is a different actor. Well, so there we go. Is there anything else you really want to say about Death Comes to Time?
So, obviously, I hugely enjoyed it when it came out, and I thought it was innovative, I thought it was exciting, but looking at it now, 20 years on, you do have to wonder how much coke was in people's heads to get them to agree to make this thing. You know, you'd have thought the BBC, who by this point are at home to the idea of a new show in theory, and they are producing a monthly book series, and they know that there's audios covering the old Doctors. Why are they not insisting that the current or a new Doctor is in Death Comes to Time?
Yeah.
You know, as we've kind of explored, this could be the capstone on the series coming after Survival, if you discount anything else that ever happened in print or whatever. So it's just such a confused premise to kill off the seventh Doctor when we know that's not what happened. And it's just endlessly fascinating, you know, because everything else in the expanded universe, you can kind of work out where people are coming from, what their idea is, what their hope is. This just seems to have been conceived by someone who doesn't really know the lore of the show he's making, and pitched to a BBC who don't really seem to have noticed they've just made a TV movie starring Paul McGann. And, you know, but we've got to have Sophie Aldred in it because she's good. Yet there's just so much about this that now I think you can really unpack and pick at. But at the time, you know, it was just a thing.
I think it gets back to what you were talking about before, about the BBC being this massive organisation that literally doesn't know its arse from its elbow. So something like this can slip through. Like, and again, in Paul Hayes' book, The Long Game, he talks about various attempts to get a series off the ground between the TV movie and the new series, and how close or not close some of them became. And they're all, like, it's weird how various different departments at one point tried to make the series, and also nobody really knew who owned the rights to the series, even though they were completely owned by the BBC.
I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? There's probably as part of RTD's multiverse, presumably one of the shows will be a show about the lost years of Doctor Who, and just be like a W1A kind of sitcom where a group of people who know bugger all about TV are trying to sell Doctor Who. I mean, this is just such an oddity in all the expanded Doctor Who media that we've got. This is, you know, just I struggle to put into words exactly why it's so weird, but you know, it's got the wrong Doctor in it. It's a pilot that kills off the star of the show. It doesn't have monsters in, as you say, although that maybe owes more to the kind of wisdom you'd have as a radio producer, that just having a funny voice doesn't always make for a great villain. You know, there's just so much to poke at here that I think any Doctor Who fan, anyone listening to this show should, if they haven't already, absolutely bury themselves in Death Comes to Time and wallow in what was and what could have been and what should have been and what definitely should not have been. Because I think this story kind of is everything to everyone. Yes, no, I completely agree. So I'm assuming you think it's an absolute banger. I think it doth bang really rather hard. Great. Know, for all that I've said, it makes no sense. I think it's one of the best stories that, you know, for that Doctor that's out there. I completely agree. Well, thanks for taking time out of your day and coming to talk about the death of two Doctor Who characters that aren't really dead. I've had less productive days. So, if anybody's listening to this podcast and doesn't know who you are and wants to hear more from you, where can they find you on the World Wide Web? I mean, that's a very unlikely contingency you've just described there, but let's go with your hypothesis for a second. I am one half of a podcast called All of Time and Space, which I make with, I say with, Mark does a lot of, all of the work. Mark Cockram, who used to be of the Blue Box podcast, and he's a very skilled editor and manages to remove most of my specious waffle, you can find us by, putting all of Time and Space into literally any pod-catching instrument, application, or program of your choice.
Yep, well, there we go. It's a fantastic podcast, and it's well worth a listen, so I advise anybody to go out. But thank you so much for joining me on this adventure through a little sidestep of all of Time and Space.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and let's do this again.
Yes, I mean, when those books finally arrive.
Oh, we can do a monthly new adventure show.
Exactly.
That's what the world needs.
So next time on the podcast, there are 2 possible outcomes as to what I'm going to be covering, so I can't even tell you what's next. But whatever it is, I'm sure it will fulfill all your Doctor Who niche needs. But until then, this has been Doctor Who Too Hot for TV. See you next time.
Too hot for TV.
Oh, that's my dog Indy. Say hello. She's seen a squirrel. Or she's expressing very, very profound opinions about the next Doctor. I don't know. I'll be honest, I don't speak dog. What was I witching on about?
About that the only thing... Doctor Who will always come back.